And so next we welcome Network Planning Director from Highways England, Jeremy Bloom, and Director at WSP, Nassar Malik, to discuss some of Highways England's strategic studies.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to talk about some of our longer term planning. We've just heard Peter Mumford talking about our delivery of major projects in RIS 1 and going into RIS 2. My involvement in Highways England has been trying to develop our longer term thinking. I've been working very closely with my colleague from WSP, Nassar Malik, who is going to come and speak in a few moments about some of the specific work that they've been helping us with. I think it's important to set the context for this in that when the RIS was set in 2015, clearly it created this longer term vision for roads that we hadn't seen for many, many years. And I think what the RIS did in terms of our longer term planning was three important things. Firstly, it enabled us to start thinking about the longer term. The 5-year commitment, the RIS cycle, enabled us to start thinking much longer term about the future of the SRN. Secondly, there were elements in it which made us much more customer focused in our thinking, much more outward facing, working with stakeholders more than we'd perhaps done in the past in a more open way. And thirdly, I think this is really important, a much more broader consideration of economy and place and environment than perhaps we had previously focused on. So traditionally, Highways Agency had been a road builder. We were much more focused on the broader context of highways development. The RIS itself has 4 key elements. There's a strategic vision, the statement of funds available. You recently heard the Chancellor announce the funds for RIS 2, and a performance specification, so a set of performance indicators, and the investment plan. So that's the schemes, particularly the schemes that we're going to invest in. And the strategic vision was really important last time to help us with the longer term planning of the network. In terms of RIS 2, this is the process that we've been going through. So the research stage we've completed, where there are 3 key elements there, and we're going to talk about those and particularly focus on the strategic studies today. The initial report was submitted in November and published in November and December last year. There was a consultation on that, and we've been working hard this year with the department, who've produced a draft RIS, and we're responding to that at the moment with a strategic business plan, which is how we would deliver that RIS. And then later into next year, we'll be finalising that for publication of the RIS at the end of next year, 2019. So the key planning elements, the things that we've done that I think have made a difference during RIS 1. The first was the publication of the Road to Growth. This was our first strategic economic growth plan, which really identified, perhaps for the first time, certainly by us, that how important the strategic road network is to the economy, and how investment in roads and in improvements in roads can facilitate economic growth. And I think that was really important. It gets referred to a lot, and I think it has changed a lot of mindsets, not least within Highways England. The route strategies, these are 18 route strategies that we've undertaken, which describe the condition of each route, and were very comprehensive. I think it's fair to say that they have improved from the previous route strategies we did before RIS 1. My commitment is to improve it again for next time, and our plan is to start again next year and to take longer over the route strategies. I think it needs to be an essential part of our planning. It needs to set strategy rather than just tell us where the problems are. But I think we've made great progress with the route strategies, and they have informed a lot of our thinking around the projects that will be considered for RIS 2. And we've taken a lot of the potential problems and develop those up to strategic outline business case stage in a way that we've never done before. So I think that's been quite game changing this time. And the strategic studies, and I think when NASA and I talked about doing this presentation today, we really wanted to focus on the strategic studies because I think they've provided an opportunity to really address some of the long-standing problems on the road network that have beleaguered us for a generation or more, and they're really at locations that are very challenging, whether it's topography, whether it's the urban environment, whether it's the rural environment, really challenging locations that haven't been addressed for a long time. So RIS1 announced that we would conduct these 6 strategic studies, and we've been working very hard on them, and it's given us a great opportunity to address some of these issues and put them onto the national stage. So Northern Transpennine was looking at east to west connectivity, the A66 and the A69. Manchester Northwest Quadrant, we know that that part of the M60 is a huge challenge for us. The Transpennine Tunnel, addressing improved connectivity between Sheffield and Manchester. The Oxford to Cambridge Expressway, in line with wider government thinking about economic growth and housing. And the M25 Southwest Quadrant, another problem area for us around the Heathrow section. And lastly, the A1 east of England. So it's a relatively substandard route. There are a lot of housing proposed in that area as well. So that was another key location for us. So I'll hand over to NASA now to tell you a bit in more detail what we've done. I'll come back at the end just to summarise what we think we've learned from it.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning, everybody. Nasser Malik from WSP. WSP has been very privileged to have been involved in each one of these 6 strategic studies at the early stages. Peter Mumford earlier, many of you were here, will have heard him talk about 3 of those studies that have progressed to the next stage. So I'll be very brief about those and skip over those in some respects, but maybe talk a little bit more about the other 3. So Northern Transpennine has just been mentioned by Jeremy. We did the original stage 0 study of that. That's successfully progressed to the next stage in terms of looking at improvements to the A66 corridor. Northwest Quadrant also just mentioned. The M60, for those that don't know it actually performs 2 functions. It's part of the Greater Manchester Outer Ring Road, which is a fairly compact ring road. It's only 6 miles or so away from the city centre. But that Northwest Quadrant also forms part of the M62 east-west motorway across the Pennines. And so it's one of the most congested parts of the motorway network in the country. The public transport networks there are also highly congested, and there have been proposals looked at in the past for improvements, but air quality and noise issues in particular have been a constraint. But again, that's another study that's progressed into actual scheme development, option development at stage 1 that's been mentioned already. I'll not dwell on the various options, but as they highways and public transport options were looked at. The public transport was considered to be options in terms of not viable for taking further, but there are other studies looking at those local road network and public transport that may complement anything on the SRN. The third study is the Transpennine Tunnel, really trying to improve connectivity between 2 of the North's major city regions, Manchester and Sheffield. Very poor connectivity currently between those 2 city regions. The existing route shown by the red line is really fairly substandard. It's got very poor alignment. It suffers from significant weather-related closures during the year and a very poor standard of route. And journey time reliability is a major issue. The alternative SRN route, the motorway route, is really 20 miles or so longer than the direct route. So the Transpennine Tunnel was looking at whether it's feasible to put a road tunnel to connect, and that was really on part of building on the work of the Northern Powerhouse Independent Economic Review, which said that there was a massive potential for improving the economic growth of the North, and one of the key elements for that was to improve connectivity, transport connectivity between the city regions, and that was really the sort of the background for the Transpennine Tunnel. And the work that we did early on looked at various corridors and various route options within those corridors. The view was that it would be technically feasible to construct such a road tunnel, although if it were to be constructed, it would be the world's longest, I think, road tunnel. There would be significant savings in journey times, and clearly you'd get the reliability and the resilience benefits. It passes through, or the tunnel would under the national park, the Peak District National Park, so clearly significant benefits there in terms of the landscape and the environment. So overall, it was considered to have a very strong strategic case, but there's a significant cost associated with the construction of that tunnel, and because of that, the economic case, the value for money, was judged to be poor at that stage. This led on to an allied study, a related study that was initially commissioned by Transport for the North, but with Highways England and DFT as co-sponsors of the study. And there were a couple of things that the study was expected to look at. One was to go beyond looking at just the Transpennine Tunnel, which the remit of that was just to look at the tunnel itself. So this study was commissioned to look at actually what might we need to do to the transport network, the highway network, either side of the tunnel, if the tunnel were to be built, and if there was significant increases in traffic volumes, but also in order to maximise the benefits of this very major investment, what could be done in terms of improving the wider highway network to extend the benefits of such a tunnel. So this study, we were commissioned to do this, and in between this study and the previous study, there was also the regional traffic model became available, which wasn't available earlier on. So this study was commissioned to look at improving some of the traffic forecasting and looking to improve the economic case, and perhaps understand the wider economic benefits that the tunnel and perhaps a package of other interventions that could be implemented would improve the overall economic case for the tunnel. As part of that work, we also proposed and looked at potentially an alternative to a full tunnel, and that really recommended a part tunnel, part surface solution. In that case, the tunnel would still be a significant length, probably between 5 and 6 miles, sort of 9 kilometres or so. And that was a recommendation that resulted from that tunnel, from that study. In terms of just very briefly, the colours on the diagram, the green either side is really areas where we felt there was a need to look at improvements if the tunnel were to be built. The orange sections were potentially additional areas that may need improving in terms of further detailed assessment. And then the purple areas really to the east were options for potentially improving the wider benefits, wider connectivity that a tunnel could provide. To the west, of course, there was the M60 Northwest Quadrant study, so we didn't concentrate on looking at improvements to the west. So those recommendations from that tunnel essentially have led to another study that's been commissioned and we're currently undertaking, and that was to develop the part tunnel, part surface route, refine the package of the wider connectivity interventions. But a key element of this study is really to improve on the technical assurance, both in terms of the traffic modelling and forecasting, and also improve both the strategic case and the economic case, challenge the scheme cost estimates, but also look at the wider economic benefits. And because the tunnel, the scheme would result in portals within the national park and a surface route within the national park, then we're looking at developing the case certainly for exemplar design, and maybe setting a standard for the future in terms of how we could improve the design of road schemes through very sensitive environmental locations. So this study, as I mentioned, is currently ongoing, due to report next year. So that's one to watch for in the future. Oxford to Cambridge, already mentioned. Again, it's a study we undertook the original stage 0 work. Again, successfully progressed onto stage 2, looking at the missing link between the M1 and the M40. So you've heard about that already. M25 is the fifth study. We undertook the original stage 0. You all know the sort of the network and the conditions there. Really, the conclusions from that stage 0 study were that it wasn't desirable to add capacity to the existing M25, both because of various environmental constraints, but also potential adverse impacts in terms of local communities. Road pricing was rejected because it was felt that there wasn't capacity away from the M25 to take any of that traffic that may move off the M25. So the recommendation was to look at options, both to look to reduce the traffic demand on the motorway, but also perhaps look at adding parallel capacity to relieve the M25. That has resulted in 2 further studies. One is to look at public transport improvements and local road network improvements and making best use of the M25 to reduce the demand. And a second study is to look at the strategic road network improvements and a strategy for the strategic road network. As a follow-on, we are currently undertaking the strategic road network element of that study. We've looked at, we're looking at short-term, medium-term and long-term solutions. We have looked at an inner and an outer corridor as improvement corridors and the feasibility of those, developing them at an expressway standard. But with the announcement that came partway through the study of the Heathrow expansion, we are now working with Heathrow. We're looking at their expansion proposals, so the study will be integrated with the Heathrow proposals. And again, this study is due to report in the summer next year. And finally, we were asked to look at the A1 East of England improvement scheme. The original study concluded that the improvement of the full corridor from the M25 to Peterborough was not value for money. So we were asked to investigate an improvement around between junctions 10 and 14, which is a relatively substandard piece of road. And our assessments looked at that, and really it's a relatively lightly trafficked road for the nature of the road. It sits within the Oxford to Cambridge growth corridor, and as Jeremy already mentioned, there's significant substantial housing growth proposals for the area. And really our conclusions from that study was that the strategic case and indeed the economic case for the scheme was dependent on that housing growth. And so the recommendation was really about understanding both the quantum and the timing of the housing growth. So that's a very quick canter through the 6 strategic studies. I can talk at length because personally been involved with a number of those. But I'll pass back to Jeremy now to give some concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Nasser. I think it's important to say that, you can see, first of all, what an ambitious and extensive programme of work that this has been, and we've been working on this for 2 to 3 years, and there's still work to go. I think we've also worked very collaboratively with the Department for Transport on this, and also for the 3 northern studies in particular with Transport for the North, and it's been very much a collaborative partnership between all of us to take these forward. I think the first lesson for me is that we have demonstrated the strategic case for transformational road investment probably for the first time in certainly many years, if not a generation. It has been very clear from the work that we've done that public transport alone will not solve the problems in these areas. We need integrated solutions, we need to look multimodally, but the case for strategic road investment is there. The economic case, the pure BCR, has been a bit more challenging, as is often the case where there is large investment. Some of these are very transformational investments, things like the Manchester to Sheffield, and it has been difficult to capture all of those benefits in the traditional methods of appraisal. We have investigated wider benefits, and they form part of the strategic case that I mentioned. So strategic case is very clear. Economic case been more challenging, and I think we need to think more about how we do that in the future. The complexity of the economic growth agenda, so housing in particular, the A1 improvement and to degree Oxford to Cambridge really facilitate growth and housing, but we don't know where that housing is going to be, the rate of build out. It's quite challenging to think about putting the infrastructure in when you don't know where the development's going to be and when. And that's been quite difficult. We're trying to solve some of that. We're trying to do that thinking, and I know MHCLG are helping us to do that at the moment with the A1. But that's certainly been quite a key challenge for us. Management of stakeholder expectations is important. I think clearly this is a very ambitious programme of work. Some of the schemes have moved forward into further into our PCF process and are being taken forward as active projects. Noises have been made by government around RIS2 and potential starts of works, but these are very costly, very large, very complex projects, and we have a number of stakeholders have had their have expressed a desire to see these happen. We need to make sure that we manage expectations and that we recognise that what we take forward here is a long-term plan. It will take time to deliver all of it, but the real benefit of the work we've done is making the case and moving the projects forward. And finally, I think it's just important to recognise that we do need a balanced portfolio. So what we've realised through our work on RIS2 is that these projects are very, very important to the future of the economy and the road network, but we mustn't allow them to crowd out the medium and smaller scale investments that we also need, that customers need on our existing network. So a very challenging programme of work. It's been fascinating, and I think hopefully it will be quite transformational for the road network over the next 5, 10, 20 years. Thank you.
Hello, Jeremy. It's Mike Mason-Williams from KPMG. Interested in how do you select the studies, the 6 studies? Was that something you did within Highways England, or was it one with the broader stakeholders, particularly the sub-national transport bodies or the DFT? And how does that then fit into the wider economic and industrial strategy that we're all working to? For these 6 studies, they were identified very much by DFT. I'm not going to look in any particular direction. The instigator of some of those is probably in this room at the very moment. So DFT, recognising at the time where the challenges on the road network were and where growth where the growth pressures were, and recognising the need for rebalancing the economy. So there is a definite join up with the industrial strategy. We're now starting to have discussions with the department about what next for RIS2, whether we, given the scale of the potential demand for projects here, whether we need more of the same or whether we need something a little different. And certainly the subnational transport bodies are expressing their views as well as to the things they want to see, and that will all be considered by the department, and ultimately the politicians will decide what goes into RIS2. So the number of parties contributing to the future of this. But I think we do need to be careful that we don't overstate what can be delivered, because we could spend a lot of time doing lots of studies, but we do have to deliver these ultimately, and they need to be affordable.
If not, thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you, Nassar.
Thank you.